You can tell a lot about a man by how he treats someone who can do absolutely nothing for him. But what happens when the person he's mistreating holds the keys to his entire future? Preston Calloway was a man who thought the world was his personal chessboard. He thought his bespoke Italian suit and his platinum credit card gave him the right to judge anyone who didn't look the part. So when he saw a young black girl in a hoodie sitting in his first-class cabin, he didn't just mock her, he tried to humiliate her. He thought he was putting a nobody in her place. He didn't know that in less than 7 hours, at 30,000 feet, that nobody would have the power to destroy his life's work with a single phone call. This is the story of a flight that started with arrogance and ended with the most brutal, satisfying karma you will ever hear. Buckle up. The automatic doors of JFK's Terminal 4 slid open, and Preston Calloway stepped through them as if he owned the building. He didn't just walk, he marched, a man propelled by the sheer force of his own self-importance. He checked the Rolex Submariner on his wrist, a heavy, ostentatious thing that cost more than most people's cars, and grimaced. Traffic was a nightmare, he barked into his phone, not caring who overheard him. If this merger doesn't close by Friday, heads are going to roll, Gerald, and I'm starting with yours. Did you send the prospectus to Titan Ventures? Good, I'm boarding now. Do not call me unless the building is on fire. He hung up without saying goodbye. Preston was 42, the CEO of Calloway FinTech, a company that was currently bleeding money, but looked fantastic on paper. He was on his way to London for the most important meeting of his life. He needed a cash injection, and he needed it bad. The target was Titan Ventures, a private equity firm run by the elusive and notoriously ruthless billionaire, Reginald Banks. Preston had never met Banks. Few people had, but he knew that if he could just get in the room, he could charm him. He could sell ice to an Eskimo, after all. He breezed through the TSA pre-check line, scoffing at a family struggling to fold a stroller. "Move it along," he muttered, loud enough for the father to hear. The father shot him a glare, but Preston was already looking away. He didn't make eye contact with people in economy. It was bad for his mindset. He arrived at the first-class lounge, grabbed a glass of complimentary scotch, aged 18 years, though he couldn't tell the difference, and downed it in one gulp. He needed the edge off. He needed silence. He needed the luxury he felt he deserved. When the boarding call for British Airways Flight 117 to London, Heathrow came over the intercom. Preston was the first at the gate. He flashed his boarding pass, Seat 1A, like a badge of honor. "Welcome back, Mr. Calloway," the gate agent said with a practiced smile. "Just get me on the plane," Preston replied, snatching his passport back. He walked down the jet bridge, the cool air of the tunnel hitting his face. This was his sanctuary. For the next 7 hours, he would be in a lie-flat bed, sipping Dom Perignon, preparing his pitch. No distractions, no incompetence. Just him and the sky. He stepped onto the plane, turned left into the first-class cabin, and stopped dead in his tracks. His sanctuary had been breached. There were only 8 suites in first class. It was supposed to be exclusive, quiet, professional. But there, in Seat 1K, directly across the aisle from his specific seat, sat a girl. She couldn't have been more than 23. She was black, wearing a faded grey hoodie that looked 2 sizes too big, ripped jeans, and chunky sneakers. Her hair was pulled back in messy braids, and she was currently slumped in the seat, tapping away furiously on a beat-up-looking tablet. She had large, over-ear headphones on, not the expensive brand Preston owned, but some sticker-covered pair that looked like they belonged in a college dorm. Preston stood in the aisle, his carry-on bag hovering over the floor. He blinked, waiting for the flight attendant to come and usher the girl back to economy, where she obviously belonged. She must be confused, Preston thought. Probably an upgrade winner, or maybe a staff member's kid flying standby. God, standards have dropped. He cleared his throat loudly. The girl didn't move. She didn't look up. She just kept tapping on her screen, her head bobbing slightly to whatever noise was blasting through those ridiculous headphones. Preston's jaw tightened. He stepped forward and slammed his leather bag into the overhead bin above seat 1A with a deafening thud. The girl flinched. She stopped typing and looked up. Her eyes were dark, calm, and utterly unimpressed. She slid one side of her headphones off her ear. "You okay there?" she asked. Her voice was smooth, American, casual. Too casual. "I'm fine," Preston snapped, smoothing his suit jacket. "I'm just surprised. Usually the airline is more selective." The girl stared at him for a second, confused. Then a small, almost pitying smile touched her lips. "Selective about luggage storage?" "Selective about who they let into the front of the plane," Preston said, his voice dripping with ice. The girl's smile didn't waver, but her eyes sharpened. She looked him up and down, taking in the Italian suit, the shiny watch, the receding hairline, the sheen of sweat on his forehead. "I think they let anyone in who buys a ticket, sir," she said, sliding her headphone back over her ear. She turned back to her tablet, effectively dismissing him. Preston's face flushed a deep, ugly shade of red. He had just been dismissed by a child, in a hoodie, in his cabin. He sat down in seat 1A, fuming. He aggressively jabbed the call button. "This is going to be a long flight," he muttered to himself. He had no idea how right he was. A flight attendant, a poised woman named Sarah with impeccable makeup and a tight bun, appeared almost instantly. "Mr. Calloway," she said, her voice a soothing whisper. "Can I get you a pre-departure beverage? Champagne? Sparkling water?" Preston didn't look at her. He pointed a finger across the aisle at the girl in seat 1K. "I want to know what's going on there," he hissed. Sarah followed his finger, looking confused. "I'm sorry, sir? You mean Miss Banks?" "I don't care what her name is," Preston said, keeping his voice low but venomous. "I paid $6,000 for this seat. I paid for privacy. I paid for an environment conducive to business. I did not pay to sit next to that." Sarah stiffened. Her professional mask slipped for a fraction of a second, revealing a flash of disgust, but she recovered quickly. "Miss Banks is a ticketed passenger, Mr. Calloway. She has every right to be here." "Ticketed how?" Preston challenged. "Frequent flyer miles, employee lottery. Look at her. She's wearing a hoodie that looks like a dish rag. She's tapping on that screen like a teenager playing video games. I have confidential documents to review. I can't have someone like that looking over my shoulder." "The suites have privacy dividers, sir," Sarah said, her tone growing cooler. "You can raise yours as soon as we are airborne." "I want her moved," Preston demanded. "Put her in business. Put her in premium economy. Give her a voucher. I don't care. Just get her out of my eye line." "I cannot move a passenger simply because you don't like their attire, Mr. Calloway," Sarah said firmly. "The flight is fully booked. Miss Banks stays where she is. Now would you like that champagne, or should I come back when you've settled down?" Preston stared at the flight attendant, incredulous. He wasn't used to being told no. He was the CEO. He was the money. "Fine," he spat. "Champagne. And bring me the purser if she makes a single sound. I mean it. One loud noise, and I'm filing a formal complaint against you and the airline." Sarah gave a stiff nod and walked away. Preston reclined his seat, glaring across the aisle. The privacy divider was currently down for takeoff. He could see the girl, Ms. Banks apparently, still working. He squinted. What was she doing? It didn't look like a video game. The screen was black, filled with lines of neon green and white text. Code. She was coding. Probably hacking something, Preston thought bitterly. Or pretending to be a programmer. He decided to test the waters. He needed to assert dominance. He couldn't let her think she had won the interaction. "So," Preston said loudly, projecting his voice across the aisle. The girl didn't hear him. The noise-cancelling headphones were doing their job. Preston leaned over the aisle, invading her personal space, and waved his hand in front of her face. She jumped slightly, pulling the headphones down around her neck. She looked annoyed now. "Can I help you?" I said, "What are you doing?" Preston asked, gesturing to her tablet. "Homework? Community college project?" The girl, Chloe Banks, took a slow breath. She saved her work and locked the screen. "I'm working. Just like you, I assume." Preston laughed. It was a dry, barking sound. "Just like me? Sweetheart, I'm preparing a merger that's worth more than your entire neighborhood. I doubt whatever you're tapping away at is in the same universe." Chloe looked at him calmly. "You'd be surprised." "I doubt it," Preston sneered. "Let me guess. You won a sweepstakes. Or maybe your boyfriend bought the ticket with miles and you're off to blow his money in London? You know, people like you ruin the experience for the rest of us. This cabin is for people who contribute to the economy, not for tourists." Chloe turned her body fully toward him. Her expression wasn't angry. It was clinical, like she was examining a bug under a microscope. "People like me?" she asked softly. "People who don't know how to behave in first class," Preston said, gesturing to her clothes. "Dress the part, or sit in the back. It's a respect thing. But I guess they don't teach that where you're from." The air in the cabin seemed to drop 10 degrees. Other passengers were settling in, glancing over nervously. "Where I'm from," Chloe said, her voice steady, "we're taught that manners cost nothing, but buying a suit doesn't buy you class. I paid for this seat, sir. Full fare, just like you. Now, if you don't mind, I have a deadline." She went to put her headphones back on. Preston felt his ego bruise. He couldn't handle the dismissal. He reached out, an impulsive, foolish move, and tapped her hand away from the headphones. "I'm talking to you," he snapped. Chloe froze. She looked at his hand, then up at his face. Her eyes were suddenly terrifyingly cold. "Don't touch me," she whispered. "Then show some respect when your elders are speaking," Preston blustered, realizing he might have crossed a physical line, but too proud to back down. "I know who you are. You're just some diversity hire or an influencer trying to look rich for the gram. You're a fraud, and I'm going to make sure the airline knows that you're harassing me." Chloe slowly picked up her headphones. She didn't put them on. She placed them on the tray table. "Okay," she said. "You want to talk? Let's talk. What's your name?" "Preston Calloway," he announced, puffing out his chest. "Google it. You might learn something about success." "Calloway," she repeated, as if tasting the word. "Calloway FinTech, based in Manhattan. Stock ticker CFT." Preston blinked, surprised. "Yes, I see you can use a search engine." "I know the company," Chloe said. "Stock is down 40% year over year. You're hemorrhaging cash on bad crypto bets. Your CFO quit last month, and rumor has it you're flying to London to beg Titan Ventures for a bailout because you can't make payroll next month." Preston's face went white. The blood drained from his cheeks so fast he felt dizzy. How do you know that?" "I read," Chloe said simply. "Financial Times, Wall Street Journal. The public record is very unkind to you, Mr. Calloway." "That's temporary market volatility," Preston shouted, forgetting to whisper. "We are pivoting. Titan Ventures is going to partner with us because we have the best proprietary algorithm in the sector." "Do you?" Chloe raised an eyebrow. "Because I heard your algorithm is slow, bloated, outdated." "You don't know what you're talking about," Preston yelled. Sarah, the flight attendant, rushed over. "Mr. Calloway, I need you to lower your voice immediately. The cabin doors are closing." Preston pointed a shaking finger at Chloe. "She's provoking me. She's spying on my company. Who are you? Who do you work for?" Chloe smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. "I'm nobody, remember? Just a tourist in a hoodie." She put her headphones back on, effectively ending the conversation. Preston sat back, his heart hammering against his ribs. He felt exposed. How did she know that? It must be a coincidence. She probably just Googled him right then. That was it. She was just a smart-mouthed kid with a smartphone. She's trying to psych me out, he told himself. Ignore her. Focus on the pitch. Focus on Reginald Banks. He took a deep gulp of the champagne Sarah had left him. The plane began to push back from the gate. I'll crush the meeting, he thought, and then I'll buy the airline and ban people like her. He had no idea that the smart-mouthed kid across the aisle wasn't Googling him. She was texting, and the recipient of her text was labeled in her phone as Dad, the boss. The text read, Guy in 1A is Preston Calloway. He's rude, racist, and unstable. He touched me. Are we seriously considering his pitch tomorrow? 3 dots appeared on the screen. Then a reply. He touched you? He's dead. See you in London, sweetie. The flight to London was smooth for the plane, but turbulent for Preston Calloway. Once the seatbelt sign flicked off, Preston immediately slammed the privacy divider up. He wanted to block out the sight of the girl in seat 1K. He pulled out his laptop, a sleek silver machine, and opened his presentation. Project Phoenix, the future of Calloway FinTech. He tried to focus on the slide deck, but his mind kept drifting back to the encounter. The audacity of her. To quote his stock price to his face, it was humiliating. He needed another drink. He hit the call button. Sarah appeared. Yes, Mr. Calloway? Scotch, double, neat. I'm afraid we're about to serve the meal service, sir. Would you like to see the menu? I don't want food, I want scotch, Preston snapped. I can bring you a drink with your meal, Sarah said diplomatically. We have a lovely roasted duck or a truffle risotto. I'll take the duck, he grunted. And the scotch, now. Across the aisle, he could hear the clinking of silverware. The divider between the seats didn't block sound, unfortunately. He heard the flight attendant, Sarah, speaking to the girl. Here is your vegetarian meal, Miss Banks, and I brought some extra spicy sauce. I know you like it. Thanks, Sarah. The girl's voice drifted over. You're the best. How's your little boy doing? Did he get over that flu? He did. Thank you for asking. He's back in soccer practice. Preston rolled his eyes. Great. She's chatting up the help. Typical. He ate his duck furiously, the alcohol beginning to buzz in his head. He felt righteous. He felt misunderstood. He was a captain of industry, and he was being treated like a criminal while the girl in the hoodie was getting treated like royalty. About 3 hours into the flight, the lights were dimmed. Most passengers reclined their seats into beds. Preston couldn't sleep. He was too wired. He got up to use the lavatory. On his way back, he glanced at seat 1K. The girl, Chloe, was asleep. Her seat was flat, wrapped in the duvet, but her tablet was still on, propped up on the side table. The screen was glowing dim. Preston paused. He knew he shouldn't. It was wrong, but the curiosity was eating him alive. He leaned over slightly, squinting at the screen. It wasn't a game. It wasn't social media. It was an email draft. The subject line read, Due Diligence Report, Calloway FinTech Acquisition. Preston's heart stopped. He felt like he'd been punched in the gut. He leaned closer, his eyes widening. The text was small, but he could make out phrases. Assets are overvalued. Leadership is volatile. Recommend immediate pass on investment. He stumbled back, catching himself on his own seat. What the hell? Who was she? Due diligence report? Was she a corporate spy? An auditor? No, she looked too young. She was probably an intern. Yes, that was it. An intern for some low-level analyst firm that Titan Ventures outsourced to. She was just writing up notes for some grunt. She doesn't make the decisions, Preston reassured himself, sitting down heavily. Reginald Banks makes the decisions, and Reginald Banks is an old-school shark. He won't listen to a 20-something intern in a hoodie. But the seed of fear had been planted. He needed to talk to her. He needed to charm her. If she was writing a report, maybe he could influence it. He waited. An hour later on, he saw movement. Chloe sat up and stretched. She put her headphones back on. Preston lowered his divider. Psst, he hissed. Chloe looked over, rubbing her eyes. She looked annoyed. What now? Look, Preston said, putting on his best fake smile. I think we got off on the wrong foot. It's been a long week, stressful. Chloe stared at him, unimpressed. Okay. I happened to glance at your screen, Preston lied smoothly. I see you're in finance. Writing a report? Chloe's eyes narrowed. You were reading my screen. Just a glance, Preston said quickly. Look, if you're an analyst, I can give you some color on those numbers. The public data doesn't tell the whole story. Callaway FinTech is about to explode, in a good way. Chloe picked up her water glass and took a sip. Mr. Callaway, I'm not an analyst. Oh? Preston frowned. Then who are you writing that report for? I'm writing it for myself, she said, and for the board. The board? Preston laughed nervously. Which board? The board of the company that decides if you have a job next week, Chloe said cryptically. Titan Ventures. Preston froze. You work for Titan? In a manner of speaking, she said. Well, Preston straightened his tie, sensing an opportunity. Then you should know that I'm meeting with Mr. Banks personally tomorrow. We're going to have a very productive conversation. I'm sure whatever low-level data entry you're doing is helpful, but the big boys handle the real deals. Chloe let out a laugh. It was a genuine, amused laugh. The big boys. Right. You think that's funny? Preston bristled, his temper flaring again. You think this is a joke? I built a company from nothing. What have you done, besides inherit a seat in first class? I didn't inherit the seat, Chloe said, her voice turning hard again. But I did inherit a tolerance for bullshit that is rapidly running out. You watch your mouth, Preston snarled. I will be mentioning your attitude to Mr. Banks. I'll make sure you're fired before I leave London. Chloe smiled. It was the smile of a predator looking at a wounded animal. Please do, she said. I'd love to hear you try. She hit a button on her armrest, and the privacy divider whirred up, shutting him out completely. Preston sat there, shaking with rage. The nerve, the absolute nerve. An employee of the company he was trying to partner with was treating him like dirt. She's finished, he thought vindictively. As soon as I shake Reggie's hand, I'm giving him her name. She'll be flying coach home. He closed his eyes, imagining the sweet victory of getting her fired. He drifted into a fitful sleep, dreaming of money and power, completely unaware that the plane was descending not just toward London, but toward his absolute destruction. The wheels of the Boeing 777 slammed onto the tarmac at Heathrow, jolting Preston awake. He felt gritty, hungover, and anxious. He immediately checked his phone. No new emails from Titan Ventures. That was good. The meeting was still on for 2 p.m. The moment the seatbelt sign turned off, Preston was up. He grabbed his bag, ignoring the flight attendants, and pushed his way towards the door. He had to be the first one off. It was a compulsion. He didn't look back at Seat 1K. He assumed the girl, Chloe, was gathering her trash, or whatever it was people like her did. He breezed through the jet bridge, feeling the damp London chill seep into his bones. Fast-track immigration was a blessing, and within 20 minutes, Preston was walking briskly through the arrivals hall. He scanned the crowd of drivers holding signs. He saw one with Callaway printed on a plain white piece of paper. You, Preston snapped at the driver, a tired-looking man in a grey suit. Let's go, I'm on a schedule. Right away, sir. Let me take your bag. As they walked toward the exit, the automatic doors slid open to the curbside pickup area. A sleek, jet-black Range Rover with tinted windows and diplomatic flags on the bumper pulled up to the curb. 2 massive security guards hopped out. One opened the rear door. Preston slowed down, watching. Who is that? He wondered. A diplomat? A royal? Then he saw her. Chloe walked out of the terminal. She was still wearing the oversized hoodie and the sneakers. She looked refreshed, holding a coffee cup. The security guards didn't stop her. They bowed their heads. One of them took her beat-up backpack as if it were made of gold. "Welcome home, Miss Banks," the guard said, his voice carrying over the noise of the traffic. "Thanks, distinct lack of sun as always," she joked, climbing into the plush leather back seat. Preston froze in the middle of the sidewalk. His driver bumped into him. "Sir?" "That girl," Preston stammered, pointing. "Who is she?" The driver looked. That's the Titan Ventures car, the customized autobiography edition. Only the Banks family uses that fleet." Preston's stomach did a somersault. The Banks family. No, it couldn't be. Banks was a common name. She was probably a distant relative, a niece, maybe the granddaughter who lived off the trust fund and had no actual power. Yes, that made sense. She was the spoiled brat of the family, the black sheep who dressed like a hobo to rebel against Daddy. She has no influence, Preston told himself, forcing his feet to move toward his own hired Mercedes, which suddenly looked very small and cheap by comparison. Reginald Banks is a businessman. He won't let a rebellious teenager dictate a billion-dollar merger. He climbed into his car, pulling out his phone. He frantically Googled Reginald Banks children. The results were sparse. Reginald was notoriously private. There were mentions of a daughter, but no photos, no names, just vague references to heirs. "Drive," Preston ordered, wiping sweat from his upper lip. "Titan Ventures HQ, Canary Wharf, and step on it." The drive into London was a blur of grey skies and traffic. Preston spent the entire time rehearsing his pitch. He looked at himself in the rear-view mirror. He looked tired. He opened his briefcase and pulled out a bottle of cologne, spraying it liberally to mask the scent of airplane scotch and fear. "You are Preston Calloway," he whispered to his reflection. "You are a visionary. You own the room." He didn't own the room. He didn't even own the car he was sitting in. But the lie was the only thing keeping him from falling apart. Titan Ventures was located in one of the tallest, most imposing glass towers in Canary Wharf. The building screamed money. It screamed old money, trying to look new money. The lobby was a cavern of marble and steel, with a security desk that looked more like a military checkpoint. Preston checked in, his hands trembling slightly as he handed over his ID. "Mr. Calloway," the security guard said, checking a list. "You are expected, 40th floor, executive boardroom." Preston took the elevator up. The ride was smooth and silent, his ears popping as he ascended. When the doors opened, he stepped into a reception area that looked like an art gallery. Minimalist furniture, abstract paintings that probably cost millions, and a view of London that was breathtaking. A receptionist sat behind a floating glass desk. She didn't look up immediately. Preston cleared his throat. "Preston Calloway, here to see Reginald Banks, 2 p.m. The receptionist, a young woman with glasses, looked up over her monitor. "Mr. Calloway, please take a seat. Mr. Banks is finishing up a call." "I'm on time," Preston said, tapping his watch. "Actually, I'm early. I expect punctual meetings." "Mr. Banks runs on his own time, sir," she said pleasantly. "Can I get you water? Coffee?" "Espresso," Preston demanded. "Double." He sat on a leather sofa that was too low to be comfortable. He waited. 2 p.m. came and went. 2:15 p.m. 2:30 p.m. Preston was fuming. This was a power play. He knew it. Reginald was making him sweat. He paced the room, checking his phone. His COO had texted, "Payroll is due on Tuesday. We need the wire transfer by Monday morning or checks bounce." Preston felt the noose tightening. Finally, at 2:45 p.m., the heavy double doors at the end of the hall opened. A polished assistant stepped out. "Mr. Calloway, they are ready for you now." They? Preston thought. Probably the board. He grabbed his briefcase, buttoned his jacket, and marched down the hall. This was it. Game time. He entered the boardroom. It was massive. A long table made of dark walnut wood stretched down the center. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the Thames. At the far end of the table sat an older man, Reginald Banks. He looked exactly like his photos, perhaps a bit frailer. He had white hair, sharp features, and was wearing a suit that cost more than Preston's house. He was reading a file. He didn't stand up. "Mr. Calloway," Reginald said, his voice a gravelly baritone. "British, refined, terrifying. Sit." 1. Preston walked the length of the table, feeling small. He set his briefcase down. "Mr. Banks, it is an honor. I've been an admirer of your investment strategy for decades." "Have you?" Reginald asked, looking up over his reading glasses. "That's funny, because my strategy is usually to invest in people, not just products." "Exactly," Preston said, sliding into a chair. "And that's why I'm here. Calloway FinTech is more than just an algorithm. It's a team. It's a vision. I have a presentation that will outline exactly how our synergy—" "Save the slide deck," Reginald said, waving a hand dismissively. "I've seen the numbers. They're concerning." "Volatility," Preston said quickly, the sweat returning. "Market fluctuations. We are poised for a rebound. We just need capital to scale." "Capital," Reginald mused. "You want $50 million. In exchange for 15% equity," Preston said. 20%, Reginald corrected, "if we were interested." "I could do 20%, Preston said, perhaps too quickly. Desperation leaked into his voice. Reginald closed the file. He interlaced his fingers and stared at Preston. "Preston, can I call you Preston? We do due diligence here. Deep dives. We look at the financials, yes, but we also look at the character of the CEO. A company is only as good as the man at the helm. Is he steady? Is he respectful? Does he have vision?" "I assure you," Preston said, puffing his chest out, "my reputation is spotless." "Is it?" Reginald's eyes twinkled with a strange, dark amusement. "You know, I'm getting old, Preston. I'm stepping back from the day-to-day operations. I don't make these decisions unilaterally anymore. I rely on my chief strategy officer. She has a much sharper eye for frauds than I do." "She?" Preston asked, confused. "Yes," Reginald said. "In fact, she's the one who insisted on taking this meeting. She met you recently, said you made quite an impression." Preston's blood ran cold. The air left the room. "She met you recently." The door behind Preston opened. He didn't want to turn around. He wanted to dissolve into the floor. He wanted to wake up back in New York. "Sorry I'm late," a voice said. A voice he recognized. Preston slowly turned in his chair. Standing there was Chloe Banks. But the hoodie was gone. The messy braids were pulled back into a sleek, professional style. She was wearing a tailored navy power suit that fit her perfectly. She wore heels that clicked sharply on the floor. She looked powerful. She looked regal. She looked like the boss. She walked past Preston, leaving a scent of expensive perfume in her wake, and took the seat at the head of the table, right next to her father. She placed her beat-up tablet on the walnut table. "Hello, Preston," she said, her voice cool and professional. "Did you enjoy your duck?" The silence in the boardroom stretched so tight it felt like a violin string about to snap. Preston Calloway sat frozen, his hands clasping his knees under the table, his knuckles white. He had expected a handshake. He had expected a signature. He had expected the clinking of crystal glasses to celebrate the salvation of his company. Instead, he was met with the inscrutable gaze of Reginald Banks, a man who looked less like an investor and more like a judge presiding over a capital case. "She," Preston repeated, the word tasting like ash in his mouth. You have a female chief strategy officer." Reginald didn't answer immediately. He slowly removed his reading glasses, folded them with deliberate, agonizing precision, and placed them on the leather file in front of him. "Is that surprising to you, Mr. Calloway?" Reginald asked softly. "That a woman might hold the keys to the kingdom?" "No," No, of course not, Preston stammered, his laugh sounding brittle and manic. I celebrate it. My company is very progressive. We have women everywhere, in all sorts of positions. I see, Reginald said. He checked his watch, a vintage Patek Philippe that probably cost more than Preston's entire wardrobe. Well, she is the one who insisted on this meeting. She told me she met a CEO on her flight in from New York yesterday. She said this man made an impression on her that was so vivid. She felt compelled to handle his file personally. Preston felt a flicker of hope, an impression. That was good, wasn't it? He had been sharp on the flight. He had been a businessman. He had projected power. Maybe someone had seen him working? Maybe a fellow passenger had admired his focus, his suit, his command of the cabin? She has an excellent eye for talent, Preston said, leaning forward, his confidence creeping back. I'm eager to meet her. Are you? Reginald asked. A ghost of a smile touched his lips, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Well, you're in luck. She's right behind you. The heavy mahogany door at the back of the room clicked. The sound was soft, but in the cavernous silence of the boardroom, it sounded like a pistol slide racking into place. Preston turned in his swivel chair. He turned slowly, expecting perhaps a stern older woman in a grey suit, a contemporary of Reginald's. The woman standing in the doorway was young. She was silhouetted against the bright lights of the hallway for a moment, a figure of sharp lines and commanding posture. She stepped into the room, and the rhythmic clack, clack, clack of her stilettos on the hardwood floor echoed like a countdown. She was wearing a navy blue power suit, tailored to within an inch of its life. It was the kind of suit that whispered authority. Her hair, which Preston had last seen in messy, comfortable braids, was now pulled back into a severe, elegant chignon that highlighted her high cheekbones. She wore diamond studs in her ears, understated, flawless, expensive. Preston blinked. His brain refused to process the image. The visual data wasn't matching his internal files. He knew that face. But the context was wrong. That face belonged to a hoodie. It belonged to cheap headphones. It belonged to a nobody in Seat 1K who ate vegetarian meals and tapped on a cracked tablet. It couldn't be. The woman walked past him. She didn't even look at him. She carried a scent of sandalwood and cold ozone, the smell of a storm front moving in. She walked the length of the table, radiating a gravitational pull that sucked the air out of the room. She reached the head of the table. She pulled out the chair directly to Reginald's right, the seat of power. She sat down with a grace that was practiced and lethal. She placed a device on the table. It wasn't a leather-bound folio. It wasn't a laptop. It was a tablet, a beat-up tablet with a cracked corner. Preston's heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. The world tilted on its axis. The blood drained from his face so fast he felt his fingertips go numb. The woman looked up. Her eyes were dark, intelligent, and currently colder than the deepest part of the ocean. "Hello, Preston," she said. Her voice was the final nail in the coffin. It was the same smooth, casual voice from the plane, but stripped of all warmth. It was the voice of the executioner. "Did you enjoy your duck?" Preston opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked at Reginald, then back at the woman. "Chloe." "You?" he wheezed. "You're Chloe Banks." Reginald filled in the blank, his voice swelling with paternal pride. "My daughter, my heir, and the newly appointed head of global acquisitions for Titan Ventures. If you want a single dime of my money, Preston, you don't convince me. You convince her." Preston felt like he was falling. The room seemed to stretch and warp. The memories of the last 24 hours crashed into him in a horrifying montage. "Move it along." I didn't pay to sit next to that. Dishrag hoodie, diversity hire. Don't touch me. He had said those things. He had said them to her. "Miss Banks," Preston croaked. He tried to stand, but his legs felt like jelly, so he sank back down. I had no idea. That, Chloe said, lacing her fingers together on the table, was exactly the point. She tapped the screen of her battered tablet. You see, Preston, my father taught me everything I know about business, but the one thing he couldn't teach me was how to see people for who they really are. Because when you're Reginald Banks, everyone is nice to you. Everyone laughs at your jokes. Everyone holds the door. She looked at him, her gaze piercing. So I created a test, a filter. I fly commercial. I dress down. I wear my favorite hoodie. I sit in the seat I paid for and I wait. I wait to see how the masters of the universe treat a young black woman who they think has absolutely no power over them. Poe. Preston wiped a bead of sweat from his upper lip. Miss Banks, please. The flight. It was a stressful day. The market volatility. I was not myself. It was a misunderstanding. Was it? Chloe asked. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. Let's review the transcript of our misunderstanding, shall we? She swiped a finger across her tablet. You boarded the plane and immediately expressed disgust at my presence. You tried to have the flight attendant move me because my clothes offended your aesthetic. You slammed your luggage around to intimidate me. I was just settling in, Preston protested, his voice pitching higher. You invaded my personal space, Chloe continued, her voice hard as diamond. You physically touched me to get my attention because you felt entitled to it. And when I dared to speak to you as an equal, you called me a fraud. She leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. Do you remember what you called me, Preston? Specifically? Preston stared at the walnut grain of the table. He couldn't meet her eyes. You called me a diversity hire, she said, letting the words hang in the air like toxic smoke. You told me that people like me ruin the experience for people like you. You assumed I was uneducated. You assumed I was poor. You assumed I was taking up space that belonged to you. It was banter, Preston cried out, desperation clawing at his throat. It was just plain talk. I didn't mean it. I have the utmost respect for everyone. I donate to charities. I have a diversity initiative at Callaway FinTech. A diversity initiative? Chloe let out a laugh, a sharp, mirthless sound. Preston, you are the liability. Do you think I would let you within 100 miles of my team? Do you think I would expose my employees to a man who treats strangers like garbage? Reginald cleared his throat. The sound was like a gavel striking a block. We received a report from the airline this morning, Preston, the older man said. The purser filed an incident report. It corroborates everything my daughter told me. She texted me from the air, you know, while you were sleeping. Preston looked at Reginald, his eyes pleading. Sir, please, you're a businessman. Look at the numbers. My algorithm. My proprietary tech. It's worth millions. If we partner, we can dominate the sector. Don't let a personal awkwardness derail a billion-dollar opportunity. Personal awkwardness? Chloe repeated, incredulous. You lack the fundamental temperament required to lead. You are volatile, you are arrogant, and you are cruel if you treat a nobody in first class that way. God only knows how you treat your subordinates when the doors are closed. She closed the folder in front of her. The sound was final. I've reviewed your financials, Preston. I read them while you were snoring across the aisle. Your cash burn is unsustainable. Your crypto exposure is reckless. But honestly, I could fix the numbers. I can fix a bad balance sheet. She stood up, towering over him. But I cannot fix a rotten character, and Titan Ventures does not invest in rot. You can't do this, Preston whispered, the reality of his situation crashing down. I need this capital. Payroll is Tuesday. If you walk away, I'm finished. The market will see the rejection. The stock will tank. You should have thought about that before you decided to bully a girl in a hoodie, Chloe said. She pressed a button on the intercom system on the table. Sarah, please issue the press release. Effective immediately. Titan Ventures is ending all negotiations with Callaway FinTech. No, Preston stood up, knocking his chair over. "You can't! That's sabotage!" "It's due diligence," Chloe corrected him coolly. "We are protecting our reputation from being associated with yours." She pointed a manicured finger towards the heavy double doors. "Get out of my office, Preston." Preston stood there, panting, his chest heaving. He looked at Reginald, hoping for a reprieve, for the old boys' club to kick in and save him. Reginald didn't even look up. He was already reading the next file. Preston grabbed his briefcase. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely grip the handle. He felt small. He felt microscopic. He turned to leave, his shoes squeaking on the polished floor, a sound of defeat. He reached the door and grabbed the handle. "And Preston?" He froze. He looked back over his shoulder. Chloe was watching him. Her expression wasn't angry anymore. It was almost pitying. "Next time you get on a plane," she said, her voice quiet but carrying across the vast room, "remember that the person sitting next to you might be the only person who can save you. Try being nice. It doesn't cost a thing." She turned her attention back to her tablet, dismissing him just as easily as he had tried to dismiss her. Preston Calloway opened the door and stepped out into the hallway, leaving the world of power and entering the freefall of his own making. Preston Calloway didn't walk out of the conference room. He evaporated from it. One moment he was a titan of industry, a man who commanded rooms and moved markets, and the next he was a ghost haunting his own life. He stumbled into the hallway, the heavy walnut doors clicking shut behind him with a finality that sounded like a gunshot. The silence in the corridor was absolute. It was the expensive, muffled silence of a place where billions were made and lost, but now it felt like the silence of a tomb. He pressed the elevator call button. His finger slipped. He was shaking, a violent, uncontrollable tremor that started in his hands and rattled his teeth. He pressed it again and again. Ding! The doors slid open. The elevator was empty, a mirrored box of stainless steel. Preston stepped inside and watched the doors close, sealing him in. As the car began its smooth, rapid descent from the 40th floor, gravity seemed to pull at him harder than usual. He felt lightheaded, his stomach lurching into his throat. "This isn't happening," he whispered to his reflection. The man in the mirror looked back at him, pale, sweaty, eyes wide with a primal terror. "It's a bluff. It has to be a bluff. They can't just kill a deal based on a flight. It's business. Money talks. Money always talks." But the silence in the elevator screamed otherwise. When the doors opened to the lobby, the atmosphere had shifted. When he had entered an hour ago, the security guards had nodded with deference. The receptionist had smiled. Now, as he walked across the polished marble floor, nobody looked at him. It was as if the building itself was rejecting him, expelling a virus. He pushed through the revolving doors and spilled out onto the sidewalk of Canary Wharf. The London air had turned bitter, carrying the metallic scent of approaching rain. Preston fumbled for his phone. He needed to get ahead of this. He needed to spin the narrative before the board heard anything. He pulled the device from his pocket, his thumb hovering over his CFO's number. The screen lit up, and Preston's heart stopped. It wasn't just a notification. It was an avalanche. 14 missed calls, 22 new emails, 5 text messages. The first text was from Gerald, his CFO. It was short, brutal, and devoid of loyalty. Legal just called. Titan pulled the plug. They issued a press release. "The board is convening an emergency session in 10 minutes. I'm sorry, Preston, I can't protect you from this." Preston's vision blurred. He tapped on the news alert from Bloomberg Markets that was sitting at the top of his lock screen. Breaking: Titan Ventures terminates negotiations with Calloway FinTech. He scrolled down, his breath coming in shallow gasps. The article was already live. The speed of it was terrifying. Titan Ventures hadn't just rejected him. They had nuked him from orbit. In a statement released moments ago, Titan Ventures cited a fundamental misalignment of corporate values and ethical leadership as the reason for the abrupt termination. Sources close to the deal suggest the decision came directly from the bank's family office. He watched the little widget in the corner of his screen, the stock ticker for his company, CFT. It blinked red. CFT, $14.50, minus 8%. It blinked again. CFT, $12.10, minus 18%. CFT, $9.45, minus 32%. He was watching his net worth vaporize in real time. Millions of dollars. His options, his leverage, his reputation were being deleted by invisible traders screaming into telephones halfway across the world. No, he moaned, the sound weak and pathetic against the roar of city traffic. No, no, no! He needed to leave. He was exposed. People were walking out of the office buildings nearby, glancing at him. Did they know? Did they recognize him as the pariah from the news? He opened his Uber app. His fingers were slippery with sweat. He tapped the destination, Heathrow Airport. He just wanted to go home. He would figure it out from New York. He would sue. He would counter-sue. Confirm ride. The spinning wheel of death appeared on the screen. Then a pop-up. Payment method declined. Preston blinked. He tried again. Maybe it was a glitch. Payment method declined. Please update your billing information. Stupid app, he snarled. He switched to his corporate American Express Centurion card. The black card. The card that had no limit. The card he used to buy cars. Transaction denied. Contact card issuer. The cold reality washed over him like a bucket of ice water. They hadn't just fired him. They had frozen him. The board had moved instantly to secure the assets. He was locked out. He stood on the curb, a man in a $6,000 suit, unable to buy a ride across town. The sky opened up. It didn't start with a drizzle. It started with a deluge. The freezing London rain poured down, soaking his hair instantly. The water seeped into the fine wool of his jacket, turning the expensive fabric heavy and sodden. It ran down his neck, cold and humiliating. He looked around wildly. A black cab rattled past, its yellow for-hire light glowing invitingly. Preston patted his pockets. He had his wallet. He pulled out his personal debit card. He ran to a nearby ATM, sheltering the machine with his body as the rain lashed against his back. He shoved the card in. Please, just £20, just enough to get away. Processing. Transaction denied. Card retained. The machine swallowed his card. Preston stared at the screen, mouth agape. He slapped the machine. Give it back, that's mine. Passers-by were staring now. A businessman in a trench coat gave him a wide berth, looking at Preston with a mixture of pity and disgust. Preston realized what he looked like. A raving lunatic, screaming at a wall, soaking wet, his hair plastered to his skull. He had nothing. No ride. No access to his accounts. No friends in this city. He looked down at his feet. His Italian leather loafers were ruined, stepping in a puddle of oil-slicked gutter water. A large red shape loomed through the rain. A double-decker bus, the number 135 to Liverpool Street. Preston had never taken a bus in London. He hadn't taken a bus anywhere in 15 years. Buses were for other people, for the nobodies he had sneered at in the airport terminal. He checked his pocket. He found a crumpled £5 note and a handful of heavy coins, change from a coffee he'd bought his assistant days ago and forgotten to toss in a tip jar. He trudged towards the bus stop. The line was full of tired commuters, students, and tourists. He stood at the back of the queue, shivering violently. When he stepped onto the bus, the driver, a large man with a thick beard and eyes that had seen everything, didn't even look up. Cash, Preston whispered, his voice trembling. He dropped the coins onto the tray. They clattered loudly. Take a seat, mate, the driver grunted, already closing the doors. The bus lurched forward, throwing Preston off balance. He grabbed a pole, his wet hand sliding on the yellow metal. The bus was packed. The air was thick with the smell of wet wool, humidity, and too many bodies in a small space. There were no seats at the front. Preston had to walk the gauntlet, moving past the staring eyes of the passengers. He squeezed past a woman with a crying baby. He brushed against a construction worker, covered in dust. He found the only empty seat at the very back, next to a teenager. Preston collapsed into the seat. He was dripping water onto the floor. He hugged his briefcase to his chest. It was the only thing he had left, and it was filled with documents for a company that effectively no longer existed. The teenager next to him was wearing a grey hoodie, oversized, faded. The kid had headphones on, big, sticker-covered headphones. He was tapping away on a smartphone, head bobbing to music Preston couldn't hear. Preston stared at the kid. The image was so visceral, so identical to the sight that had enraged him only hours ago, that he felt a physical pain in his chest. I did this, Preston thought, the realization finally piercing his ego. I did all of this to myself. He looked out the window. The rain blurred the city lights into streaks of neon. He saw a billboard for British Airways towering over the intersection. The slogan mocked him in 10-foot-high letters, "Fly first class, arrive ready." Preston Calloway closed his eyes. He didn't arrive ready. He arrived arrogant, and he was leaving broken. He leaned his head against the vibrating glass of the bus window, pulled his wet jacket tighter around himself, and for the first time in his adult life, he wept. The downfall was swift and total. 3 months later, the Wall Street Journal ran a small sidebar article on page B4. Calloway FinTech had officially filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The assets were being liquidated to pay off creditors. Preston Calloway was not mentioned in the recovery plan. He lost the penthouse in Manhattan first. Then the Hamptons estate went to auction. His circle of friends, the people who drank his scotch and laughed at his jokes, vanished the moment the credit card stopped working. The last anyone heard of him, he wasn't in finance anymore. He was living in a small, one-bedroom apartment in New Jersey, working as a logistics consultant for a trucking company. He still travels for work occasionally, but he doesn't storm to the front of the line anymore. He doesn't bark at the gate agents. He walks slowly, head down, clutching a boarding pass for Group 9. He sits in 34E, the middle seat. And he is the quietest, most polite passenger on the plane. Preston Calloway learned the hard way that true wealth isn't about the watch on your wrist or the seat on your plane. It's about how you treat people when you think you have nothing to gain. He thought he was sitting next to a nobody, but he was sitting next to his fate. In a world where you can be anything, be kind. You never know who you're talking to. The intern could be the CEO. The quiet girl in the hoodie could be the one signing your paycheck. Karma doesn't always have a deadline, but when it arrives, it collects with interest. What would you have done if you were in Chloe's shoes? Would you have given him a second chance, or did he get exactly what he deserved? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story of instant justice, please hit that like button, share this video with a friend who needs to see it, and subscribe for more stories of truth, karma, and reality. Thanks for watching.